Hi, Stacy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Actually, I am feeling great. I started out the day fasting, and it was a really good reminder. I kept saying all cog, I have to get off coffee before Yom Kippur. And then I was like, oh, for sure I'll be able to fast tomorrow. And I got through half the day, and then my head, and then like as soon as I started really moving around and headachy and everything, I was like, oh yeah, I really had to have a cup of
Yeah,
coffee, and then I really have to get off coffee now this week before Yom
yeah,
Kippur.
yeah, right, exactly. It does help, but yeah, I
It's
know.
not the caffeine either. I'll switch to green tea tomorrow. Hello, Bonnie. It's really the caffeine. It's the coffee caffeine specifically that kills me on a fast. Um, so yeah. So guys, we have a week now, 9 days a week till Yom Kippur. We just finished Rosh Hashanah. And we're starting a very short no, sorry, this one is not. Last week was a very short chapter. This is a pretty long chapter. It'll probably take us 2 weeks, but we'll get started and we'll see. Just to do a quick review, we finished the Gate of Trust on our first round. We've moved into the book Lights Along the Way, which is a version of the Massilat Yesharim, which is the path of the just. And this one is written by psychotherapist Rabbi Tursky. It's his opinion on it. And he brings in a lot of Hasidic sources. And we keep going back and forth between our study of Gate of Trust and our study of this book, because our study of Gate of Trust is God's unconditional love for us and the complicated good that he's constantly bestowing upon us, and our constant worthiness and our constant relationship, and that comes first. And then if we have that perspective, and last week we talked about this idea of authority, like who do you read? Who do you listen to? Who do you give that authority to in your life, where you're like, yeah, their opinion of what looks good or what's right or what would benefit me, like I really value that. And what does it take to have someone whose opinion of how you should live your life really means something to you? Set a standard that you want to live up to, that you want to work on yourself to achieve. The number one thing you have to have with that person is trust. And so we talked about how this book is kind of from that trusting place, telling us about character traits that are necessary for us humans, God's most beloved Jewish children, to build in order for us to have our ideal society, in order us to live into our potential. And these are all things that are going to take us our whole lifetime to work on. And the level that we're at with them is in no way impacting God's love for us. And so we're safe and we're okay to be working on these things without the perfectionism and self-criticism sneaking in and kind of breaking us down. And so this is a perfect time to continue. And we're starting a new character trait. And this is going to be really interesting, especially in the context of health and wellness, because it's abstinence. And that's something that we don't like very often. So it's going to be interesting to hear the context of what parts of this character trait do we feel repelled by or do we feel attracted to. So we're going to get started. For anybody who has the book and is following along, we are on page 184. Okay. Please feel free to unmute yourself, raise a hand, like let me know. I am going to pause to discuss, but if you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate. If the first three traits stood independently, one might well consider that one has successfully mastered watchfulness, which we said was self-awareness, and therefore we're not, doing any huge mistakes. Then we've mastered motivated aligned action, in Hebrew called zrizut, enthusiastic and diligent performance. Such a person is indeed in full compliance with the Torah. If one has proceeded beyond this and also mastered inner cleanliness, right? When we keep our side of the street emotionally clean, that was the last trait we worked on. Now we have cleansed ourselves of all the sources that could prevent us from really not doing our job. then one has achieved a very high level of spirituality. Congratulations to you all. But these traits do not stand alone. They are but the first 3 of 10 steps towards spirituality. Hence, we may conclude that even after mastering watchfulness, self-awareness, zrizut, which is motivated, aligned action, and nikias, keeping our side of the street emotionally clean in our behavior, one has not yet even reached the halfway mark. We should therefore not be surprised with the Ramchal's, the author of the book, next sentence. Abstinence is the beginning of Chassidut. At this time, we will translate Chassidut as saintliness, but we will elaborate on this later. All that has been explained up to this point is basic requirements for being a righteous person. And from here on, we are going to discuss the requirements of saintliness. So saintliness sounds really far away, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But what he's saying is, let's review. Being self-aware is a prerequisite for every human being to be a better self. Knowing how to take motivated, aligned action is really critical in bringing into the world all the good that you are put here to do. Cleanliness, keeping our side of the street emotionally clean, is necessary for the kind of deep relationships that give meaning and fulfillment to our lives. Or take the other things we're doing and shoot them off in a self-serving direction, which can really impede our relationship to God and our relationship to other people. So now we're going to move into this. Achievement of watchfulness, rizut, and nikiyut only classify as a righteous person only, right? We should all be so lucky to be working on mastering those things. One has not even begun to enter this idea of chassidut. Saintliness is a really old word, so I'm going to stick with chassidut until we come up with a more modern phrasing. It is interesting to note the consensus of many ethical works. Rabbi Shneur Zalman in the Tanya describes very stringent requirements achieving total self-mastery, which calls for the complete dominance of our good inclination over our bad inclination in thought, word, and deed. Yet the subtitle of Tanya is the book of the average person. To these ethicists, someone who might consider to be a very extraordinary tzaddik is in fact just an average person, one who's fulfilling the minimum requirements of Torah observance. I see you, Shulamit, I'm coming. Why go on then? It would seem that we would be fortunate enough to even get anywhere near the successful achievement of the self-awareness, the motivated aligned action, and the cleanliness. Is it even realistic for us to expect more of ourselves? The Hasidic master asked one of his followers what his goal in life was, and the latter responded, to be a good Jew. The master shook his head and said, if you aspire to be a great tzaddik, perhaps ultimately you will become a good Jew. If all you aspire to be is a good Jew, you may fall short of that. In other words, one should aspire for the highest. We may understand this by comparing spiritual aspirations to economic aspirations. A person who has a goal to become wealthy generally sets his sights on great wealth, hoping to become a multimillionaire, and exerts himself accordingly. Looking for various ways in which to make his fortune, there may be factors that prevent his plans from materializing, but not all of his endeavors may succeed. But he may achieve sufficient success in some of them to become moderately wealthy. However, if his aspirations are only to achieve the goal of an average income, the various factors that may interfere with his plans may cause him to achieve less than the average person. So it is with spiritual aspirations. There are numerous factors that can interfere with one striving for spirituality. If one sets one's goals high and aim for the ultimate, even if we fall short of the goal, we can at least hope to be average. If one aspires only to be average, then the detriments may well leave one grossly lacking in basic spirituality. Okay, Shulamit, hit me up. What do you got?
First of all, hello. So timely. It's really nice to be doing this. I feel like it's come full circle for me. I started doing Massilat Yesharim with my son, which I didn't realize was lights along the way. And at the same time, I was doing a 12-step program. You know that Rabbi Twersky is a specialist in addiction. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't realize. But I was studying Massilat Yesharim with my son. I was studying Lights Along the Way with my Rabbani, and I was doing a 12-step program all at the same time to get myself out of a very bad place. And every time I studied something, I was like, wait, what? They're all the same thing. And every single step was aligned. And it's amazing to me how coming out of addiction, those 12 steps are literally aligned with the 10 steps of Massilat Yesharim. So even like the coaching that that we both do, it's very like the tools are literally taken from source. So interesting. What I thought of for Hasidus, I had the same struggle as you with the word saintliness. I wonder what you think of this. So Chassid is a student, Chassid is for me is disciple. So Chassidut could be discipline in that, not harsh discipline, but like loving discipline, self-discipline, because the word discipline comes from the word disciple, which is a Chassid. So I thought to be an Eved Hashem, it could work for me. That's the way I look at it. I don't know. I don't mean it in a harsh way, like discipline, like with a stick, but discipline as in, I want to be a disciple. I want to learn. I want to be like you.
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. And as I've read this once before, but it was also many years ago, and you have as well. I think also when it comes to the word discipline, we all hate to be disciplined, but we all love the feeling of self-control, that when we say, I like that thing that I just did, that habit, that was like really disciplined. That was self-disciplined. And there's something incredibly empowering about self-discipline, and something we very much reject about being disciplined, right, by another person. Whereas where you have that image of the stick, or these other kinds of visualizations. I'm interested if anybody else has anything to add to this. And I think by the end of the chapter, whether we'll have found the perfect word, and we're going to put this up there, and we're going to use this till we switch it out, or we establish Chassidut as loving discipline, loving self-discipline. Okay, so we're going to go back. We're on page 186. The concept of abstinence is based on this Talmudic precept: sanctify yourself even with that which is permissible. In other words, not only must one abstain from that which is forbidden, but one should also restrict oneself from certain things that are permissible. The reason for this being that in partaking of that which is permissible may indirectly cause the transgression of a prohibition. So this is a huge concept in Torah literature overall, and it's something that I think is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like controversial today in society. If it's okay, how come I can't push the boundaries of everything that is okay to me? There's enough that I can't do. How come I can't push to every single bit that I can squeeze out that I can do? And I think that's a controversial feeling to a concept of, oh, but I'm really afraid that I'm going to do this thing that I shouldn't do. So I'm just going to not do this other thing I could do that's going to bring me close to this other thing I can't do. And I think a lot of people struggle with this controversial feeling until it comes to somebody that you really, really love. I think that when we think about a relationship that we really value, whether it's a child or a best friend or a spouse or a parent, and we've done something sometime that was really hurtful to that person, and we felt that breach, have you ever come to a space of like, wow, I don't ever want to come close to doing that again? Whether it's maybe even with yourself. Bonnie, do you have a thought? Or are you just joining us on video just for fun?
I lost you and then I'm back.
Okay, awesome. So what I was just saying is this concept of what he's saying is this Torah thought about restricting ourselves even with what's permissible. And I can tell you this is directly related to our relationship with food. All foods that are kosher have a place, okay? I really don't believe that there's any single food out there that in moderation is really like just cannot ever be eaten or tolerated. However, if you talk to people who really take their health seriously and know their body, they will give you a list of foods that they don't eat generally, whether it's gluten or it's dairy or it's white sugar, or it's processed this, or it's this kind of nut, or it's like this kind of bread. They know themselves, and they know that those foods like really send them over the edge and have them either hurting themselves by overeating, or giving themselves bad indigestion, or giving themselves some other kind of emotional weight gain or anything else, right? So we do know this concept of, wow, all foods are permissible. These foods are all kosher, but there's holiness. And here's what he says here: sanctify yourself, kadesh. Make yourself holy by creating some separation, even in things that are permissible. Because we know that there is a real psychological thing called a trigger. And while we can heal many triggers, and being triggered is an opportunity to confront those things, there are things that just aren't worth always confronting and confronting and confronting. Sometimes confronting them means putting them aside and saying, this doesn't serve me. This behavior is too close. It brings me too close to a complete breakdown. It brings me too close to going over a boundary that I don't want to go over. And so it can be a relationship with food. It can be a relationship with yourself, or a relationship where you know you've gone over. Maybe you don't raise your voice anymore at your kids because you know that once you start raising your voice, you say things that you can't take back. Maybe it's certain kinds of conversations that you don't have because you know once you enter that kind of conflict, you're not really in control of yourself and you'll do something you regret. Everybody who is a thinking person has made some of these very abstinence boundaries that he's talking about. Every single one of you here is holy. And so what we're talking here with Chassidut, Shulamit offered this idea of being self-disciplined, being a disciple, being loving. Here he uses the word holy. That part of becoming holy is creating some separation through choosing to separate ourselves even from things that aren't evil. They're not bad, they're permissible. Okay? The similarities between the Michal and Rabbi Shneur Zalman are striking. The latter said that which is forbidden is of course prohibited, but much of what is permissible is unnecessary. Rambam considers sanctifying oneself in what is permissible as being a characteristic of Chassidut, by actually a scriptural requirement contained in the commandment, you shall be holy. And this is hugely impactful as we're coming up to the holiest day, Yom Kippurim, where the Kohen, the high priest, would go into the Holy of Holies, the separated space, inside the separated space, inside God's separated house. That you cannot make a distinction between this idea of creating separations and this idea of creating a space for holiness. He points out that a person may be in full technical compliance. And remember, we've talked about being compliant and how so much of our education was pushed to make us compliant. But why we had to read Shari Bitachon first is because being compliant isn't enough. We need to be connected. We need to be in relationship, not just be compliant. But we can still be vulgar and indulgent. Perhaps never before in Jewish history was the Rambam's teaching as relevant as today in modern times. Until fairly recently, people who observed kashrut had a very austere diet. I recall as a child that there were two types of wines available: sweet wine without sugar and wine with sugar, primarily used to restrict their sugar intake. Kosher wines were not for the connoisseur. How different things are today, with a variety of strictly kosher wines available that can satisfy even the most discriminating palate. The same is true of all food, so that virtually every non-kosher product has a kosher counterpart, under the supervision that satisfies even the most observant person. It is indeed to have at your disposal an abundance of ethnic foods and gourmet delights that enable us to be physically indulgent. Spiritual achievements and physical delights are at opposite poles. This is why I truly believe that if you want to have a healthy relationship with yourself and your body and with food, You have to be putting equal and opposite focus on your soul and your spiritual life, because the more that we over focus on the body and on food, the more we get pulled into an obsession versus saying, hey, it's not that I can't have, challah. It's that having too much of it, that pulls me away from the space that I want to make for what's behind the challah. What's the prayer? What's the connection to spirituality? How can I invest more effort in, if you've ever gone to a challah bake, this spiritual Kabbalistic ritual of making challah versus the indulgent sitting and consuming of challah. And it's really switching our whole relationship with food and our health and our body to one of where we're not restrictive of everything. We enjoy life, but we enjoy life and food from a place that has an equal, if not greater, opposite focus on the relationships we're building through food, the blessings that we make that are uplifting the food, et cetera, et cetera. And the more that we bring that into our life, no matter what our level of observance, the greater our overall health, mental, physical, emotional is going to be. Spirituality requires simplicity, using the goods of the world for survival and optimal function, to enable a person to pursue the ultimate goal in life, service of God. A healthy diet which provides adequate nutrition is essential, but titillating the palate with delicacies is not. Thus, if one is seriously interested in the pursuit of spirituality, one should be satisfied with essentials and forego unessential excesses and luxuries. We'll recall in his introduction, the Ramchal was extremely critical of what he referred to as the gross misconceptions of piety and saintliness, and he discourages fasting, hurting yourself as being foolish. Here, his advocacy of abstinence would seem to contradict this. So he's going to go into more detail, right? You might ask, what is the basis for adding on restrictions? And they say that to someone who has taken an oath to abstain from wine or meat, are the Torah prohibitions not enough for you? You have to do more? It would seem that our sages said, hey, you don't need to do more. Why do we have to improve upon this? Why are there limits and self-imposed restrictions? Does the Talmud not state that we will be held accountable on Judgment Day for not enjoying the amazing world that God has given us? The Ramchal addresses this conflict by pointing out that there's differing opinions in the Talmud, which first appear to be in disaccord, and the resolution of these will reconcile these two opinions. In the Torah, we find a provision for the Nazarite. If you don't know who the Nazarite is, he watches the procedure happening of an adulterous woman. And he is so disgusted by, not her specifically, but the idea of sexual misconduct in our community, that he goes to the rabbis and he wants to take an oath of being abstention from grapes and wine, from cutting his hair, and from bringing korbanot and eating meat. One opinion considers him to be sacred for taking this restrictive oath, while the other one considers him to be sinful for unnecessarily denying himself things which God gave to man to enjoy. The reconciliation of these ideas comes in the account of the high priest Shimon HaTzadik, who saw a young man with attractive long hair flowing over his shoulders and beautiful locks approaching the temple for the ritual of a Nazarite. What prompted you to take an oath that would result in you shaving your beautiful hair? He asked. The young man answered, one day I was looking at my reflection in the water, and seeing how handsome I was tempted to sin. I knew the Yetzer Hara was luring me to sin, and I exclaimed, I swear to God, I will shave my head in his service. The high priest kissed him and said, you are a sacred Nazarite. This young man's self-deprivation had a specific purpose. He did not think that by taking his vow, he would become a super tzaddik. Rather, he felt very vulnerable to sin in an area and took drastic steps to avoid being entrapped by the Yetzer Hara. This goes back to what we were talking about in terms of food, in terms of creating a space for yourself, especially this week, when we're going to be in a state tomorrow and all the way through Yom Kippur of severe emotional vulnerability, to not keep at hand your most triggering emotional foods, but to keep at hand your Shar Bitachon. To keep at hand, I really recommend, there's a set of cards, like a deck of kind of cards you can get on Amazon. I'll put the link in our group again, called the Vasal Dorsal deck, and it has all these different somatic exercises for grounding and for emotional and physical wellness. Really helpful. Reading Massilat Yesharim, praying, being with friends, being with family, talking about your feelings. Like, those are the things that are deeply healing. And when we move away the emotional eating, where we kind of go into our whole and freeze state and consume, we put that down, we create space for holiness. We create space to get out of ourselves and connect with our people and connect with everybody else who's in an equal vulnerable position. And I have to tell you, I've been feeling that all day today. You feel this sense of vulnerability. And it's uncomfortable. Nobody is saying vulnerability is comfortable. The Yetzer Hara preys on us when we're vulnerable, because in that moment we can reach for spirituality and God, or we can reach for sin, which makes us feel certain and exit vulnerability for a brief moment. The Baal Shem Tov supports the Ramchal's position of discouraging mortification of the flesh, like Christians who hit themselves and things like that. Self-deprivation carries a risk that the person may feel he has sacrificed so much for God that he is a tzaddik, and that may result in vanity, which is the worst sin of all, as we talked about before. One of the Hasidic masters say, I prefer the Rasha, who knows he's a Rasha, than the tzaddik, who knows he's a tzaddik. And we all know people like that. Okay, we all know people who are like, you can't. Okay, abstinence is thus not without pitfalls. The Talmud Yerushalmi requires a person to partake of the divine bounty, but do so with the realization that it's a divine gift and to be grateful for it. Thus, a person who eats tasty food and says blessings with the proper concentration, afterwards recites a bracha with gratitude towards God, is converting eating into an uplifting mitzvah experience. I heard something very beautiful that has really helped me to be more conscious with saying blessings. And that's every time we make a blessing on the trees before we eat a fruit, we are actually giving spiritual energy to all trees on earth. And that time we become a partner with Hashem. We're like, we took in the food and we're sending back out spiritual power. And anybody who knows anything about nutrition knows that all fruits and vegetables are much less nutritious than they ever were at any point in history. And so it's really interesting to think that we're like sending back out the power for the same fruits and vegetables that we eat to be more nutritious and more healthy and more impactful. And the same thing when we make a bracha on all of the grains, we're saying, hey, we want the earth, we want people not to be hungry, we want people to feel satisfied. And there's still people who are hungry on earth. And there's still so many of us who struggle with feeling satisfied, that obesity has become the second largest killer on the planet, okay, in developed countries. So adding in a little spiritual oomph to every single human being, that they should have what they need to get satisfied, and that once they have it, they should feel satisfied, is something that you really get to be a part of. And it's really pretty cool. Unless one has an appropriate reason for denying oneself what God has provided, we shouldn't do so. Okay, we're back. I'm confused. Are we abstaining? Are we not abstaining? Abstinence may be praiseworthy, as we've noted earlier, and that many worldly experiences are temptations that a person could be vulnerable to. But a person may increase his vulnerability by becoming so accustomed to good wine and good food that he becomes dependent on them. They are necessities and not luxuries. Should that happen, and he could afford these, he might be driven to do things that are forbidden in order to satisfy what he wants, to become and create addictions for ourselves. And I have to tell you, this is also a huge part in our relationship with food. Anybody who's worked with me, we talk about a treats. How many treats are you having in a day that you don't even consider treats anymore? Because they're just part of what you have to have in your day. That first cup of coffee, we were just started the call with talking about, that I get addicted to coffee super quickly, and I have to break that addiction before Yom Kippur. I pay for it. I had to break my fast 12:30 today and drink water and have a cup of coffee because I felt that lightheadedness, that headache, that weakness that wasn't from not eating, or was from not having coffee. And so making sure I break that addiction before. How many of us are addicted to different foods? We have to have that chocolate every day. What I have to have this treat. That's a necessity. That's not even a treat. We feel that way about clothing. We feel that way about things in our homes. I know it's true. I really was thinking about, I really have to buy new tablecloths for my sukkah. They're for a mitzvah. Do I have to or I get to? I want to. It would be an amazing gift to do that, or I need to. Knowing our needs and our wants is a huge part of obviously creating a space for holiness in our life. And it's something we're all going to struggle with in big areas and small areas, like Shulamit mentioned, addiction level areas that are severe addictions, and in smaller areas, which are, let's say, more subtle addictions. Okay. Any questions, comments before we move forward here?
Yeah, I just feel so, I think I should probably work with you, Lily. That's what I think. That's all I have to say. It's really, I just, and the older I get, the more I realize how hard it is anyway to, I'm trying to lose some weight. And I'm so depressed because it's like, I can't do it. It's not coming off. And I've been eating well for the past 2 weeks and nothing's coming off. And it's like, or I've been eating better, more conscious and more, smaller and, not eating the challah and not, and yet, and I'm just like, I don't know, it's really, I want to find someone to work with who has the understanding of, that's what I was going to post, Hani. It looks like you have the same idea, like in my community, who cannot just focus on losing weight, but really focus on the spiritual aspect as well.
Connie said that you can speak, Connie, I'm not going to speak for you.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. I've been working with Lily and I highly recommend Lily. Lily is amazing. And let me tell you, this is a life journey. It's not something like, oh, okay, I'm going to lose my weight and then I'm okay. This is something that we're always, and what I respect so much about you, Lily, is that I see no matter, like, you still want to always keep striving to be better, because that you're working on yourself, you're learning it, so you're an inspiration. This is what life is. We're human, and we're always on the journey to try to improve ourselves, no matter what, no matter how high we reach. So, and Lily has such amazing tools, and I really found that you were and you are very helpful to me. And and definitely I highly recommend Stacy. It's a great idea.
Okay, Lily, I'm going to reach out to you later. Thank you.
Sounds good. And I super appreciate all of this love. I'm going to bring it back to the Massilat Yesharim here. And thank you very much. And he's gonna bring it here to what Shulamit was talking about so nicely. We were talking about drug addiction and alcoholism. Because also I was reading a book on hormonal balance for myself as I'm, moving into perimenopause and making sure I'm doing what I need to do and fixing, making sure I'm going into this next stage on top of the trauma of living through a war to make sure I'm taking care of myself properly. Also, I have clients and one child who have different hormonal kind of very specific needs, and I always want to be including it. And one of the things that I was shocked to read is how alcoholism among women has risen in the last 20 years. Statistically, over the generations, alcohol was primarily a man's issue. And really, alcoholism was not as prevalent among women as it is today. And food also, food addiction, emotional eating is 60% more prevalent in women than it is in men. And in our community, I would say that's probably an even higher percentage, though I don't have any statistical data on it. And one of those reasons is it's a very social, acceptable medium to get a quick hit of dopamine, to get a quick right? Like feel good sensation in the body and exit kind of all of the other very daily stresses and struggles and trials that we're experiencing, and doesn't seemingly in the moment take away from all of our responsibilities. It's accessible. It's not, it's affordable. It's better than, taking high prescription medicine, and we get that same high. And so it's something that he says that's just very common today. As we have greater affluence, we have greater access to these things. And that's what he's going to talk about here, that we can develop a dependence on anything: food, alcohol, tobacco. I have to tell you, one of the saddest things to me is the smoking that's going on here in this country. Since the war started, the rates of smoking among young people, kids, like 13 and up, has skyrocketed, let alone in the adult population, which had been stopped smoking, which we've been going down in terms of smoking for a long time, has skyrocketed. And it's because of the constant stress. It's an easy thing to become dependent on. And I really look forward to the next few years, Ezrat Hashem, of everybody like being a huge amount of coaches helping people stop smoking. Okay, future jobs. Cigarette addicts have been known to walk long distances in a blizzard to get a pack of cigarettes. Narcotic addicts whose drugs are very costly may stop at nothing to get their drug, write bad checks, cheat, lie, rob, steal to get money to finance their habit. It is understandable that people may take desperate measures to get the bare essentials of life, whereas we should be able to dispense with non-essential luxuries. But when some things are necessities or luxuries is very relative. I recall after World War II, when some of the survivors of the Holocaust came to Israel, there were appeals to send clothing, whatever money one could spare, for people who had lost everything. Our congregation undertook a campaign to gather used clothing to ship to these people who had escaped the Holocaust with nothing but their lives. We once received a thank you letter from one of the recipients, and it was written on personalized stationery. I was appalled. Someone who had nothing, is in need of used clothing, can afford to have personalized stationery printed? I commented on this to my father, who told me that he recognized the name of this person, who was a member of a very wealthy family in pre-war Poland. You must remember, he said that for her, personalized stationery was taken for granted as an essential of life, along with bread and water. It's simply unthinkable not to have your own stationery. She did not consider it a luxury. If we only think of it, we will realize this attitude is quite prevalent in ourselves, all of us. Some people recall the late 1940s air conditioning was a rarity. In fact, very hot days, people would go to the theater because it was the only place that had air conditioning. Only the wealthiest of families could afford this extravagance in their homes. As time went on, air conditioning became so widespread that it is not a luxury anymore, and no one would consider a family living on charity for having an air conditioner. This phenomenon is equally true of many other technological advances. A family subsisting on public funds is not considered to be misusing their allotment because they have a car, a television, or even a microwave. At the time of this writing, it would be considered inappropriate if they were to have a cell phone, and it's only a matter of time between that will become a necessity rather than a dispensable luxury. We are already there. A person who wishes to devote his life to the study of Torah and the performance of mitzvot may decide he does not wish to be distracted by increasing demands for income that would allow him a higher standard of living. We are told that if we have bitachon and trust in God, he will provide for us. He gives bread to all flesh, for his kindness is eternal. The divine promise is for bread, not caviar. Hence, one should limit the time devoted to making money to what's essential to the necessities of life. It is related that the Chafetz Chaim supported himself and his family through a small shop, which his wife tended while he studied Torah. She was instructed that as soon as she had earned enough for the day's provision, she was to close up the shop. Living the most austere life, this great sage lived to be almost 100 and benefited the world with many great works of halacha and musar. The Chafetz Chaim and many of our great Torah personages headed to this teaching and the ethics of our fathers. This is the way to acquire Torah: eat bread with salt, drink water by the measure, and sleep on the ground. Austere life is conducive to Torah study. Just as an alcoholic cannot say that he's become dependent on alcohol and that his dependency can be ruinous, there are so many people unaware they've developed a lifestyle that may be detrimental. Whether this is in order to satisfy the desire for greater comfort and pleasure or keep up with others, in either case, pure intellect does not rule, and the desires influence our thinking, and we rationalize when we must have things that are not in fact essential to our optimal functioning. A bit of honest reflection will reveal the validity of this. A person who wishes to avoid the pitfall of dependency and the conversion of luxuries to necessities may take the precaution of leading an austere life. He does not think that by doing so he's a great tzaddik, and his austerity does not result in vanity. To him, this is a reasonable decision, just as someone would avoid beginning to smoke cigarettes because of the awareness that it will become a habit, which will dominate him. Like the Nazarite praised by the high priest, this austere life is just a protective measure with a well-defined purpose, and this type of abstinence is commendable. I'm going to make a suggestion here between now and Yom Kippur. Remember what he said today. Somebody who's living on charity, like would have an air conditioner and a microwave and a cell phone. And he is not in any way saying that we shouldn't have these things. And if you have been blessed with great wealth, he's not saying you shouldn't enjoy it. What he's saying is that when the pursuit of wealth becomes our main effort, we may get more. Remember, he started this chapter. We might be living better than average, but it will have consumed all of our days and all of our effort. And whether or not we ever get that is up to God. But it says in the Shar Bitachon that if you make really good efforts to pursue what you need relative to your society and your time and yourself, then if you're meant to be wealthy, God will bring it to you in a way that doesn't create huge obsession. But understand that with great wealth comes great responsibility. And like he says in the Shar Bitachon, somebody who is very wealthy does not sleep as well as the employee does, who doesn't have all the responsibility of managing and maintaining that wealth. Okay. And still it could be taken from us at any time or given to us at any time. So it's not either something that we can rely on that will just make us safer, right? How many of us like have a certain amount of money in the bank or a certain amount of money in savings that magically makes us feel safe? In fact, we're recommended to be putting something aside to have a month or 2 or 3 or 6 of our income, so that should something happen, we would have something else. But sometimes that money is available to put away and sometimes it isn't. And it's for us to look at ourselves and see where what was once acceptable and a luxury has now become a necessity. I'll give you a personal example. My husband and I go on a date every single week. Going on a date is a necessity for our marriage. Going to a restaurant on a date is not. Getting a bottle of wine at the date on a restaurant is not a necessity, right? Going to the most expensive restaurant and getting 2 3-course meal, not a necessity, right? Date, necessity. And throughout different times, we've had to expand that budget and contract that budget where we do free dates, and you do dates on the beach, and you do walks in the park, and you do listen to free concerts, and you watch a show together, or you go to a movie, right? Like, and sometimes you can share a meal at a luxury restaurant. Sometimes you can have your own meal, and sometimes these things are available and sometimes they're not. But that line is so easy to get clouded the second we become acculturated to something. And it's really a gift if we look at this as a process of renewal going into Yom Kippur. If we look at our life and we say, wow, I don't have to stop doing these things, but I need to shift them from needs to luxuries in my mind. I just need to say, okay, like eating at night might not be a need. That might be a luxury. Sometimes it's good for me, like Shabbat or a holiday meal that's later at night. But maybe on an average night of the week, I should finish eating before it gets dark out or when it gets dark out. And I don't need to have that late night snack. I don't need to eat at night. I could abstain from that and create space for greater holiness in the evening, greater activities, other better suited ways of relaxing, unwinding, creating, in my relationships at home, relationships with friends, in my personal space. There's lots of things I could be doing that would be more productive. Okay, we all go through this with our amount of television we watch. We go through this with money we spend on many, many, many things, on our relationship with food, in countless ways, every single one of us. This is something that could add value to our life rather than detract from our life. Chana, do you have something you want to add? No, okay. Anybody have anything they want to add? Shulamit, thoughts? Anybody else have anything you want to add here?
There is something actually, Lily, that came to me as you were saying it. It's actually from another coach that we both know. Do you remember Yael?
Yes, I still work. I
So
still am in her momentum community. She is amazing.
yeah, she is amazing. So one of her stories that she told, I don't know if it was during our course that we took or whether it was on a podcast, but she has a friend who is one of these South American, fabulously wealthy, ridiculous, like mega iconic
Yeah.
oligarch status Jews. And she was once trying to raise money for some Lubavitch institution that she was trying to create when they first moved to this area, there wasn't anything and they needed $1 million. And so they contacted this man. And he was like, how much do you need? And they said, well, we actually need $1 million. And he was like, fine. He just signed a check right then and there for $1 million. And so he was like, he's that kind of man that he didn't think twice about it and he was very generous. She actually interviewed his daughter on a podcast.
Yes,
and
I
her
heard
story is
that.
also very interesting. So the daughter story stuck in my head and it's very relevant to what you're saying now. You'll have to excuse me, there's a lot of explosions going on at my end. I might have to run in the middle of what I'm saying. Sorry, trying to focus. So she was saying that one time she used to, when she was younger, her dad used to include her in on his board meetings, which were like all these very important people. And some of the times that he had his big factory or whatever he was doing, he had to make payroll. And some weeks he was in so much debt because it was a bit of a roller coaster being so wealthy. Sometimes it was high and sometimes it was low. And one week he couldn't make payroll and they couldn't pay their employees. And she was sweating and she was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? My father can't pay his employees. And he was just like as chilled as a cucumber. And he was like, no, don't worry, we'll figure it out. And he did. He whipped in the money from somewhere. But afterwards, when everybody had left, she sat with him and she said, Dad, I don't understand. How are you so calm? When all these things are happening, this is like millions of pounds that you owe to people. How did you stay calm during that? So he says to her, honey, at the end of the day, I don't need all this. I'm happy with a can of tuna. If I lost it all tomorrow, I'd be able to start again because that's how I feel. And it was such an interesting way of looking at things because I remember my parents' generation, war refugees, they used to be so excited about roast chicken and things like that. And you're right, we've upped the ante so much that we expect for Yom Tov 1 million courses and it has to be like a magazine and good housekeeping, table settings. But honestly, when I look back at my childhood, Shabbos was so simple. There was a white tablecloth, silver candlesticks, simple china table setting, and it was beautiful. And there's something innocent about that approach that's just this is enough. It is a kind of addiction, isn't it? It's not an addiction to abundance, but an addiction to needing all the things, all the trimmings. And we forget that inside, really, all we need is really a can of tuna, maybe some roast chicken. That should be enough for anyone. And it was kind of playful way of looking at it. I'm not saying he didn't want to pay his employees, but he realized he would have to pay out of his own pocket. And if he did, so be it, he'd lose it all again quite happily. And I think that's really a very deep thing to recognize. And maybe that was the source of his wealth, that he had that attitude. In fact, I have no doubt that it probably did contribute to the fact that he was so wealthy, that he was able to risk things like that because he didn't need it.
I think that's a huge thing and a huge lesson for us also in terms of, anybody ever hear of minimalism? Everyone's chasing, decluttering. What is decluttering? Decluttering is this inner search for abstinence, this inner search to have less, and recognize that having more can be a burden as much as it can be a blessing. What is the difference between abundance and too much? What is and in that pursuit of wealth that the Shari Bitachon says, when you're pursuing wealth, you're pursuing a headache. Recognize when you have investments, you have to manage that. When you have employees, you have to pay them. All of these things. And I think, you're in the north, you're hearing bombs. I'm in the center, non-stop. I'm hearing jet planes over my head every 5 seconds. And we have people in the call who are in the United States. We have people call Ruth. Where are you located in Israel?
Malot.
Malot, where is that? So you're mid-north, right?
Between Nari and Sfat. And it hasn't stopped booming
Yeah.
The whole Yom
so
Tov,
the
the whole day is boom, 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 all the time. It's terrible.
Yeah, Shulamit is also, she's in the Golan. So we
Mm.
got north here. And we're here learning Torah. You're in the States, we're here. And we're creating sacred space in our time to learn Torah. We're separating from the news, from checking what's the boom, is there anything I need to know, what's on the news? No. We're separating to create sacred space. And when we're going through this week and we're preparing for Sukkot, right? Because we have Yom Kippur, and then 3 days later it's Sukkot. Let's try to appreciate the sense of getting closer to minimalism as we get closer and closer to Yom Kippur, where we have a day where we're fully holy, we fully abstain from everything. And then we come back to luxurious going out of our house and our daily luxuries to this sukkah where we're supposed to sit and just let God like shine all around us and sit. Like I was thinking about Sukkot this year and I'm like, wow, what about like people who sleep in the sukkah and they have to run inside, go to the shelter? Like that's going to be crazy. But like maybe it's not, maybe Mashiach's already going to be here. I don't know. But like that's really what it means, is to like create space for something special. And so when we're minimalizing, when we're thinking about a relationship with food, when we're thinking about a relationship with other people, like I'll tell you this really, like I'm just making plans with my daughter this week to go get her a new dress for the holiday, because I saw over Chag, she and her sisters were fighting over dresses, but really she doesn't need another dress. She doesn't need another dress. It was really an excuse to just do something to make her feel good, because she was feeling like, you know, a lot of feels this week. Is that what I should do? Is that what I shouldn't do? I'm just going to rethink it. I'm going to have a conversation with her about it before I just go buy her a dress. Shulamit.
Oh, yeah. Something else that, yeah, what you were saying, actually, I can give you an example from my own life quite recently, actually, 2 examples that might shed some light on human nature and the way we are built, and the truth of what it says in Pirkei Avot, that the more, how do you say, marbe nechasim marbe da'agot. So I have a very pretty house in London. I've been a single mom for most of my life, and it's been my mission to make it a beautiful home for my children. They shouldn't feel any lack. So I've collected from all over the world. I've got a baby grand and Persian rugs and this and that from India, Peru, and you know, my oak bed from Bali, all the crazy things. And then when I was deciding to make Aliyah, I did it in an instant. And I just thought, well, sell it or rent it, doesn't matter, in a day. And I rented it in the same day that I put it on the market, first person that came through the door. And then the agent said to me, I need to make an inventory. So I called up someone from the community who does inventories, and he came in the door and he literally almost had a heart attack. He goes, Shulamit, it's going to take me a week to do an inventory on this place. You know, honestly, it's going to cost you a lot. So I said, no, don't be silly. Just do the main things and the rest, it doesn't matter. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I don't care. He goes, what do you mean you don't care? I said, look, I'm not going to be living here. I've enjoyed it. It's been nice. And what do I need to be worrying about it when I go to Israel? I'm living very simply here. I don't know if you can see, I'm literally living in a bachelor pad that has ants in the bathroom and I don't know, kids stuff everywhere. And I don't really care. And he said to me, oh my gosh, that's so inspiring. He goes, I've been thinking about making Aliyah. I'm so worried about all my things. And you've just inspired me. I'm going to do it as well. He goes, I want to save you a few $100. You don't need an inventory. Just take photos of everything and it'll be fine. And honestly, my tenant has been the worst tenant in the world. She hates everything and she's complaining about everything and moaning. And I just keep saying, it's fine. Do what you like. She doesn't want this there. She's given it, I mean, it's my estate agent, just put it in a loft. You don't want this, throw it out. I don't care. And it's just so liberating to not worry about all these things that I always think about. Oh my gosh, what if this happened? What if that happens? The insurance. I think, do you know what? I'm going to build a new life here. Please, God, Hashem will give me the strength to build things again the way it was. And if not, I'm also happy with a can of tuna. Do you know what I mean? It's actually fine. And the war has almost liberated me from the attachment to all these sugar things that we hold on to that we think make us happy, but actually make us so stressed. So
Yeah. And my mother-in-law is coming to visit.
I didn't know you
this
made that.
list of
Yeah,
things.
I had no idea.
I'm in the middle. Yeah. Yeah, I'm
No
I
idea.
love it. I'm still waiting for all the paperwork. Don't ask what the things that they ask from you. And I'm
Mhm.
ADD, so I'm very bad at paperwork. But the essential part of Aliyah, which means I'm here, that I've done, and I'm here.
Shah Tova. I had no
Shah Tova.
idea.
Amen. Thank you so much. No, I've basically, with my body, I've already done it. I'm here. I've been here since July.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I never thought you'd make Aliyah. That's amazing.
Amazing things have happened in the group this year. I think there's been a lot of
Yes, that's so
miracles
English.
and
You're so English.
a lot of amazing things. Okay. We're gonna do just a few more minutes. We're gonna end with this section. The only scriptural ordinance regard to clothes is the prohibition to mix linen and wool, and the requirement for tzitzis on a four-cornered garment. However, it is clear that overindulgence in extravagant garments, while not strictly explicitly prohibited, lead to vanity, the worst of all character traits, as well as to envy and lust. Furthermore, when expensive clothes become a necessity, one can exploit others to acquire them. Socializing is permissible, but how much neglect of Torah study, gossip, slander, lies, levity arise from idle conversation? The Ramchal continues to point out that even after the achievement of our emotional cleanliness has been eliminated, temptation to sin, danger lurks in activities that are not sinful in and of themselves. For example, there's no need to wear extravagant clothes to keep warm, and one could be dressed very appropriately in modest clothes. Often one dresses lavishly to impress others, and this behavior is a symptom of vanity as well as provocative of envy, both of which are adverse to spirituality. An addition of costly clothing becomes essential if one transgresses Torah laws in order to acquire the means to obtain them. I'm going to just mention this for 1 second because this is super important going into Chag, okay? And especially for women, I want you also to remember that while this is a book highly appropriate to men and women, he wrote for a male audience at his time period, just saying. I want to say something about vanity. And I'm saying this just as someone who works with women who are really trying to build up their self-esteem and feel good in their clothes. There is this thing among women who like, let's never feel like a 10. If I feel like a 10, I'm going to inspire envy or lust in someone else looking at me. Okay? And we are in, I think, the generation of Mashiach, and every single person should have permission to shine their absolute brightest light. Okay? That being said, your brightest light might not be in the most expensive dress, okay, or the most elaborate, expensive hair covering, or the fanciest manicure. But we all know that there's a level within us that's I feel like a 10 in myself, not in what other people think of me. And I'll tell you, my mother-in-law is coming to visit, and I said to my daughter today, I need you to re-clean your room because her room is the safe room. And I said, if your grandmother goes in there, like, I'm not going to be able to live it down. Okay. What is that? Worrying about impressing others. Okay. Like above other things. I'm telling you, I made a list in my house today of things I need to do before my mother-in-law visits. And she's a lovely woman. And there's
the safe room mother-in-law thing is a real thing. I've got my neighbors downstairs and I go to their safe room because I haven't got one. And that was the first thing. She was like, oh, the way you keep your room, oh my gosh, now we're all in it and we can see your mess. And I was like, stop, you're giving me a safe haven, but she was so embarrassed about it. I was like, stop. It's
right?
so
It's a
funny.
real thing. It's funny that that's what's the thing, but it's a thing. So, but I have to come to it from a place of like, how do I care about this? And can it be from a place of kibbud aim instead of a place of shame, judgment, and criticism? The internal work is really important when it comes to clothing. And I think it really goes back to Nikias when he talks about vanity and cleaning up your side of the street. And I think we all know when we want everyone else to be envious of us versus we really feel like we are shining our most authentic light. Does anybody feel like they're not really sure where the line is? Raise your hand because we could talk about it. No, I bet you know where the line is, Shulamit.
Well, no, so there's two things. The one thing I wanted to share a lovely little vignette with you, but the other thing is that sometimes with me, I can actually go a bit too far the other way. And my daughter has to point out to me, she's like, Mom, there are levels that, because I think there's also self-respect and, getting our nails and hair done is important and things like that, like grooming. So I just wanted to honor somebody whose yahrzeit it is this week. It's my aunt, she was my cousin's wife. And she passed away Rosh Hashanah 2 years ago. She was like, this is a secular kibbutz. It's mostly Chiloni, and you would just call her Chiloni. I mean, she would probably call herself that, but I don't see her that. For me, she was a big tzaddikas, honestly. She used to always come in her humble way. She always brought she always provided everybody with anything they need. And every time I came, she used to come with her husband, just stand there, wait for me at the station and come smiling and make sure that I had the blankets and cookies and everything. And I remember when she invited me to her son's wedding, when her son got married and I went to her son's wedding. It was actually in Meron.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful wedding, a fancy wedding. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous wedding. And the morning of the wedding, she just decided, which dress she was going to wear. And it was just like she picked out her Shabbat dress. That was the dress that she was going to wear. Her blue dress that she wore Shabbat, and that was what she wore. She didn't even have her hair done. She just she did her hair nicely. Her daughter came, blow dried it for her. She put a little bit of makeup on, hardly anything. And then she just went to the wedding. And I was like, wow. I mean, where I come from in London, people spend months and years planning weddings. And she just showed up in her Shabbat dress. And she was so happy and she was radiant. I've never seen anyone look so beautiful. And it just taught me such a lesson. So for my son's wedding, I tried to channel her, and I was like, all these things don't matter. The important thing is that you're here. And, my mother used to say, you beshine the color or whatever. And that's enough, We lost the plot somewhere with these things. We did.
It's very true. And at the same time, I see so many women that because they feel self-conscious about their body, they don't dress up. They don't put makeup on because they don't want to call attention to themselves because they feel like they're flawed.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's this inner space of feeling so beautiful with yourself that my grandmother always said, and this is what I tell my girls when it comes to makeup, the more beautiful you are, the less makeup you need. Like if you see a girl with caked on makeup, there's probably something wrong with her skin. Judge positively. If you're blessed to not need it, don't do it. Don't buy it just because someone's selling it to you. And on my weight loss journey, remember I lost 80 pounds, years ago, and I hired myself a personal stylist after I lost all that weight because I didn't know how to dress myself in this body. I felt this ooh, am I showing off? Because now people are commenting on my weight loss. What's modest here? What feels authentic in this body? And so I think a lot of times, it's something that we need to discuss as women. How do we feel that sense of inner worthy readiness, being your own 10, but not having it have to fit a mold of everybody else. And yet who do we dress for? Other women, right? We all dress for other women because we know they're tick, 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 tick. Are you checking the boxes? And so in ourselves, also going into Yom Kippur, looking for the inner beauty in each other, no matter how they're dressed, no matter, top of the nine or, Shabbos dress, just see that's her. There are people who really get a lot of joy out of these things. There are people who get a lot of joy out of cooking more intricate food, and people are simple, 10 minutes, I'm not spending more. This is also character traits that are inborn that we all have to work towards opposite, balance and things. And it's so important for that woman who can't imagine life without her, weekly blowout and this and this and this. To hear about a woman going in her Shabbat dress is so important. But for a woman who goes in her Shabbat dress because she doesn't feel worthy of putting the investment in to really look how she wishes she looked, she needs to hear the other story. It's the same thing with all the overdoers and all the people who are sitting. Both messages are very valid to the right ears.
That makes so much sense, actually. It's like the man, Rabbi Elimelech of Lishensk, I think his name was. He used to have 2 notes in both pockets. And one said, I come from dust and ashes. And the other one said, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. So one of his pupils said, yeah, but how do you know when to take out which note? And he goes, aha. that's the chokhmah, So, but it's true. We do. I suppose that what you're saying is that if you're already in that place, you need to be careful of the other thing. But if you're in the other thing, you need to really be okay and give yourself permission to, yes, dress up, and that you are worthy of dressing up if you want to, and that you should. I think there's one thing that I struggle with that I'm sure at least one of you may have. It's the Yom Tov thing when you go to shul. And even though I feel really confident in my own skin, I barely wear makeup, hardly ever. And I feel fine, you know, okay, I'm aging, but that's normal. Sometimes my weight fluctuates. I'm pretty self-accepting about that. When you go to shul and everyone's wearing all the outfits, you know, all the fits, and then you just get this one person, she gives you that look. It's like the up and down look. I don't know how to do it because I'm not that sophisticated, but do you know what I mean? It's like your self-worth can just take a huge plummet and crescendo, and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, like, is that how people see me? You know? So even though I feel okay about myself, it just takes one moment in the wrong shul to sort of feel like bit of a wobble there. Have you got any coaching advice for those situations?
It's on all of us to not be that woman. It's on all of us to not be that woman. Like, I will tell you, I've been thinking of one person who I know very close to me who did not go out like she could have this holiday, and it's because she put on a little weight, and didn't bother me. I'm sure it didn't bother us. Her thoughts about what other people were going to think of her made her stay home, and you can't bring it up if they're not bringing it up, right? They're like, I just don't feel well. Okay, sure. Right? I just don't feel well. Okay, I'll come check on you. We'll come have coffee. Like, I'll come over to you and help be with people where they are. But it's a real thing that we make people feel bad unconsciously and this is also setting communal standards, right? Like, every community has their standard. In Israel, you know, it's very casual. You know, you show up in like something else, it's like, oh, you going to a wedding? Like, it's kind of funny. And like, you know, in America, you might show up too casual to something and people are like, what? Like, did you not notice the communal standard here? And this idea of communal standard is part of what makes a community, but it also can be something that is used as a weapon, can be weaponized against other people. And so I think when it comes to feeling that way, we have to recognize that for that person in shul who you showed up for, who you might look different than some other people, it's not a wobble. It's probably a ray of light for 3 other people who are dying to dress that way, who might show up that way next time, even if you're not there. You know, who needed to see that somebody else was brave enough to dress that way so they could dress that way. And for everybody else, just don't be that person. But it sucks who hasn't been on the side of like that at some point. Stacy, you want to add something?
I just want to say thank you. This has been an amazing hour plus, and I can't wait for the recording because I want to share it with so many people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next class is right after Yom Kippur on next Sunday, and that'll be our last one before Sukkot. We will probably not meet over Sukkot. Man, it's just going to be crazy. We'll meet again right after Sukkot. Thank you guys. The recording will be available. And just 1 second of a Bitachon story. Apparently over Rosh Hashanah, YouTube canceled my account for having spam. Someone must have reported it and reinstated it before Yom Kippur was over, before Rosh Hashanah was over. So in the merit of all our learning that is on my YouTube page, no doubt, it was reviewed and came back up without me feeling any way inconvenienced or stressed, where years and years and years of content that I have invested on YouTube on my channel would have disappeared. So that is pretty interesting and really awesome Bitachon story that happened that I'm very grateful for. So have a few days, I will have this up. I'll probably do it tomorrow, send out the link in the group, as well as the Vagel card deck, which I highly recommend. And I'll talk to you guys later. Stacey, I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank
very
you so
much.
much.
Everyone,
Thank
have
you.
fast
Bye.
well, whatever the
Some
cause.
kind.
Have an easy
Bye.
fast.